So, how do I recognize ADHD in girls? Today, we'll go over why ADHD is so often overlooked in women and girls. I'm Christine, and I'm an ADHD coach, and I work with so many individuals, both girls and boys, who have ADHD, and I help them thrive in a neurotypical world. ADHD historically has been more frequently diagnosed in boys/men. And I say boys because oftentimes ADHD is first diagnosed in elementary school, middle school, when boys aren't men yet, they're boys. And what has been happening and what's happened in the past is that people think of that I guess traditional view of ADHD, of that hyperactivity piece. And that is the piece that is often exhibited by boys. And so in young girls, ADHD can have a very different look. Oftentimes they present with more of the inattentive type ADHD, which is that daydreamy, hard to focus type presentation, which means that they're not acting out. They're not causing the issues. They're just not catching what's happening in the classroom. And so people don't see that. They don't see it the same, and it gets diagnosed in boys because they're causing problems. They're going to be taken to get a diagnosis. So while there's no evidence that men, boys, girls, women have a disproportionate level of ADHD, it really is, and this is a really bad description right here. It really is something that, historically boys have tended to get that diagnosis sooner, and even adult women have trouble getting a diagnosis, even when the symptoms all show up, because they have worked hard over life to be people pleasers, to do the right thing, and to, kind of go with the flow and not stand out in the crowd. And so when people look at that, they're like, well, you can't have ADHD. You're not hyper. You're not interrupting me. You're not doing all these things. And so it's really important for people to see that ADHD isn't one size fits all. It's not that view we have of little boys who can't control themselves and are getting in trouble all the time and shouting over the teacher. It's not always that. There's a different look to it. And that look is most often associated with girls and women. Yeah, I think that women definitely mask more with their ADHD. There's that feminine need to be a caretaker and to kind of be a people pleaser. And so they are working really hard to not let anybody know that they're struggling, and they're putting in all these coping mechanisms that make things work for them. Boys and men tend to be a little bit more, this is just how I roll, and they do all of that kind of stuff. Women are more like, oh no, I've got all this handled. So many of the adult women that I work with as clients, what they will say to me is, people from the outside think I'm an amazing teacher, that I have my act together, that I'm so organized, that I can do all of these things and take care of my kids and, all of that. And what they don't see is how hard I'm working every day to make that happen. So while to the outside world, everything seems great, they feel like they're like one dropped juggling ball away from pure disaster. And they don't want anybody to know that. They are trying to just do it all themselves. And that's what I see so much, especially in the adult women that I work with. So I don't know that I've noticed that there's any more or less stigma around girls having ADHD. I think there's more of a disbelief that what women are experiencing is ADHD. So a lot of times women have gone through and been diagnosed with anxiety. They've been diagnosed with depression. They get diagnosed with all of these things and they're being treated for them and therapy and all this. Nothing seems to work, when in actuality, it's ADHD. So I don't think the stigma is different. I think the belief into what that looks like for women is really different. And kind of on another note, which this just popped into my head as things tend to do sometimes, but one thing that I find really interesting, and this relates to women, is people will sometimes say to me, well, why does it seem like women are getting diagnosed so much more now than they were, 20, 30 years ago? All of a sudden you have this, is it real? What's going on? I think that there's a cultural reason behind that. And when you look at our lives 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, and I got to think now, like when that really was, because sometimes, 30 years ago seems to me like it should be the 70s, and it's really not. It's a little sooner than that. But when we think back to, the time, like my parents' time, and that women often stayed at home. Maybe there was one car in the family. Kids after school activities all centered around neighborhood activities, rec leagues where people were at home. And women had less, in some ways, less things on their plate, right? Where today we have women who are holding down a job, maybe two jobs. They are wives, they are parents, they are running room mother things, they are driving kids back and forth to all these after school activities all over town. And it's changed. And as we add more things to our plate, that's often when, just in general, people notice that their ADHD symptoms just spring out and, are harder to manage and cope with. And so I think that describes a lot of why, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, not as many women got diagnosed, because, and I'm not saying anything, about women during that time. They still had many things and chores, but the speed of their life, the things that they had to pack in there, they weren't what they are now. And it's hard to manage all of that. So I think that that's something that's really important to consider as we look at women and girls and ADHD diagnosis. So thank you for watching. You probably see some videos popping up on your screen. Go ahead and watch some of those. If you'd like to see some of my other content, you can subscribe to my channel. And again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.